1 Samuel chapter 22 for this evening. After our early introduction to David, he was almost unrecognizable in the previous chapter, chapter 21. We've just never seen him like that before, that he had one of his not so good chapters. And there are a handful in the life of David. Chapter 21 was certainly one of them. I think there's a mini message in that for us, that first of all, yes, we're going to have similar chapters in our life. We're going to have some not so hot chapters, but that's not the end of the story. That when we get to those really bad chapters in our lives, when you have a chapter 21 in your life, all the more so in that moment, you should be so grateful for the grace of God, that He doesn't judge us based on the worst chapters of our lives. If you think about it, judging according to the law of Moses, that's exactly how judgment would go. We wouldn't get judged for our highs. We wouldn't get judged on a curve or on a scale. We can't outweigh the bad with the good. Being judged according to the law of Moses would mean, well, let's just take the absolute worst thing you've done, the lowest you've sunk in life, and then that's going to be your judgment. You're going to get judged for the worst things that you've done. Thank God in moments like that for the grace of God that gifts us with the ability to confess those terrible chapters in our lives and then flip the page on them and just start over in a new chapter, hopefully working toward making a better chapter for ourselves. Well, chapter 22 is a formative chapter for both David and Saul. They both experience very formative events here. David's will lift him up, and Saul's will sink him low, about as low as a person can sink. And then it's not just a momentary thing for the chapter, but this becomes a trending pattern for both of these men in the future to come. If we were to put this in stock market terms, I would put it to you like this: sell everything you have and invest it in David right here, because David is about to rise. Now, it's just like the stock market in the sense that, yeah, there will be some temporary fluctuations. David's not always going to do perfect, but he's on a very gradual rise. I guess you can't say it started here. It started with the whole Goliath thing. He's getting back to it now. But from here on out, David is going to be on the rise, and then Saul vice versa. You'd want to sell all the stock you had in Saul right now, right at this chapter. And I don't know why anyone in their right mind would still be holding on to stocks for Saul. You should have sold them off a long time ago, as you've learned about this guy. But if you still had him right here, sell those stocks off, because that market is going to crash. He's going to sink low. Things are going to get dark for him. And then those are going to be the courses that are set for both of these men permanently. And there's no use giving away exactly what it is that I'm referring to. I don't want to do that in the introduction, so let's just get to reading in chapter 22, 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 1. It says, David departed from there, and that would be Gath. That was where David was previously. It's where we left him in chapter 21. Whether he was trying to make an alliance with the Philistines there in Gath as a place that he can hide out from Saul, or whether he was trying to trade the sword of Goliath for something a little bit more usable. Regardless, whatever it was that David had in mind for visiting Gath, that was an epic embarrassment in the life of David. So David departed from there, from Gath, and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Adullam means refuge or retreat, and I shared with you last week that the cave of Adullam overlooks the valley of Elah. That's where the whole David-Goliath showdown happened. So I think this would be a very good place for David to take refuge. It's actually interesting that word means retreat, because I think of like men's retreat and women's retreat. Those are places you go off to. Your everyday, ordinary life gets broken up. Everything's out of the ordinary. It's a place where you can reset, you can think things through. It's a place where you can take refuge in the Lord. And you come back from retreats, men's retreats, women's retreats, and you're all just fired up for the Lord, at least usually. That's the way it's supposed to work. Well, this Adullam, which means retreat, this is a good retreat for David. to be able to, as I stated last week, look across from the mouth of the cave of Adullam and see the valley of Elah, where all of this took place, where all of it started for David, where the big showdown happened, where through the hands of David, God took down a giant like Goliath. And now the number one thing, as David is in this place of retreat, is trying to figure out where to go from here. He can't stay here forever. And I will tell you that when you are wanted, dead, or badly wounded, as David is, when you are running from the law, there's absolutely one thing you cannot do, and that is you cannot go home. Now, I don't know that from experience, so don't get the wrong idea. I know that from watching TV, just like you guys do, but you know how this works. The people that are looking for you, that is the first place they're going to look, and they're probably going to set a stakeout up at your house to monitor whether or not you return home at any point. So David knows he can't do that. He can't go back to Bethlehem of Judah, where he lives, but where to go at this point. And that is the question, the issue that David is wrestling with as he stares out the mouth of this cave, the cave of Adullam. And I think he picked a perfect spot to do that. This cave was 10 miles east of Gath, and it was about 13 miles southwest of Bethlehem, where David is from. And it was right between the country of Israel and the country of the Philistines. It was like a little border strip that ran through there. The valley of Elah, right? That's why the showdown between the Israelites and the Philistines and the whole Goliath thing, 40 days of taunting them, that's why it happened in the valley of Elah, because this was like the border between the two. And ordinarily, they gave each other a lot of space there. They gave each other a wide berth. It was like neutral ground. And so David's there in that neutral ground trying to figure out which way to go. He doesn't really honestly know what's safer right now. Is it safer to go home and be among the Israelites, or is it safer to go and try to make something work with the Philistines? It's like, well, do I want Saul to kill me? Or do I want one of the Philistine kings to kill me? Because that's the kind of choice it looks like David is trying to make. And I think it's always a sad state of affairs when you're having a difficult time trying to figure out, should I go and be with the heathens, or should I go and be with the people of God, the so-called people of God? Which direction should I choose? It's always a sad state of affairs when you can't honestly make that decision and figure out what's actually best for you. It shouldn't even be close. There should be no competition there. And yet somehow I feel like you know exactly what I'm talking about. Somehow I feel like you can relate to this. Maybe you've had to say similar things to friends in the past. Look, I know you started attending that church, but listen, I'm not sure attending that church is any better than just hanging out with your heathen, unbelieving friends, honest to goodness. Because you go to that church, yes, you might hear something about Jesus, but Jesus will not be accurately portrayed, and he'll probably be more so of a side character in a drag queen story hour. And if you think that's never happening in a church anywhere ever, you'd be dead wrong on that. That kind of stuff is happening in so-called churches. And all I can say is, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. They have no idea what they're doing. Reading on in verse 1, and when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, when they heard that David is on the run and somehow heard that he was hiding out in the cave of Adullam, they went down there to him. So since they were David's family, they either knew that they were a target or they were concerned that they would become one. They probably just did not feel comfortable being within striking distance of Saul's anger toward David. And I'm sure they also just flat out wanted to be with David, his family. They wanted to love on him and support him and help him in any way that they could, just stuff that a good family member would do, especially in David's case, because it's not like he's on the run because he murdered someone in cold blood. David is on the run. He's wanted, dead or badly wounded, pretty much for being the perfect man of God. That's about it. That's the size of it. So it's wonderful that his family shows up. This is like the break we've been waiting for David. We fell in love with this guy's character very early on, a wonderful man of God. Many things to learn from him. We've been watching him now go through some hard times with Saul after him. We've been hoping that David might catch some breaks. Here's the first big break that he catches. And this is only the beginning. Things are about to get a whole lot better in the camp of David there at Adullam. Look at this, verse 2. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him. Sounds like a real fun group to be around, doesn't it? But they had some pretty incredible celebrations. Reading on. And he became the commander over them, and there were with him about 400 men. So David now has what I refer to as a gloomy band of misfits to lead. The distressed, indebted, and embittered have all come to David, and they've come to willingly submit to him and his kingship. And that tells me that it wasn't just David's life that was miserable because Saul has gone off the rails here. He's come unhinged. It's not just David that is being impacted by that, but that Saul's madness is affecting everyone, or at least many people within the nation of Israel. They're beginning to feel that. He had people stressed out. Bad government will do that. He has crashed the economy. Bad government will do that. And, everyone's running up their credit cards now. Okay, not really a thing. Didn't have those back then, but everyone's in debt because of the bad economy. And they are starting to become bitter against their king, King Saul. Saul's approval ratings, they've hit bottom here. And the nation, or at least this merry band of misfits, they want a change. Forget this bozo. Let's find David. Wherever he is, let's submit ourselves to him. Let's just start our own new nation right here. I've shared with you a couple of times now that this feud between Saul and David is typology for Satan and Jesus. So try this one on for size. If David is representative of Jesus in typology, then who would David's merry band of misfits be representative of in the New Testament? Are you sitting down for this? It would be the church. That would be the typology. This merry band of misfits that we're going to study for a little while here in chapter 22, that would be typology for Christ's church. The distressed, the indebted, the embittered, those kinds of folks were attracted to David for the same reason they are today attracted to Jesus. What's the reason? The reason is because, speaking of Jesus here now, interpreting the typology, he is hope. He is hope. They can turn to him. He can rule, and his rule can bring about change. His rule can help. His rule can save. David's rule can save lives and make life better. Christ's rule can save not just lives, but souls, which is by far the most important thing. So don't be offended by the comparison. Don't be offended by the first state that we find this group in that is representative of the church. That was our first state too. Are you willing to admit that? When you came to Jesus, were you all together? Were you out of debt? Were you flying high and happy as whatever? Probably not. You probably looked more like this. Distressed, indebted, and embittered. That was your first state. The Apostle Paul taught us in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, right around verse 29, that God chose what is foolish, God chose what is weak, God chose what is low and despised. Not a very comfy message for us since he chose us, but it's why he chose those kinds of people, we kind of people, and what he would do with those kinds of people that really give you the encouragement to see this as nothing but a good thing. We were kind of a miserable lot when we first came to Christ. We had things that we needed help with. We had sins that we needed to be free of and forgiven of. We had made messes of our lives, so we came to Christ in that state. But then what? Did he leave us as foolish, weak, despised? Did he leave us as distressed, indebted, and embittered? No, he didn't do any of that. He didn't leave us in those conditions. He then immediately began in us the sanctifying work that takes place upon faith for justification. And as Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 3, what he ended up doing was taking that gloomy band of misfits. Have I been saying merry thus far? Okay, gloomy, that's what I'm looking for. Taking that gloomy band of misfits, distressed and depressed, and then turning them into good soldiers of Jesus Christ that could endure hardship, like whatever the world or the enemy would throw at him. So that's the work he's done in us. That's the wonderful message in all of that. And David is going to do that exact thing with this gloomy band of misfits that has joined him in the cave of Adullam. Over the next 7 years, they would end up becoming David's mighty army. And they're not just good at what they do. They're not just well-trained and an effective elite fighting force. They are also like ridiculously loyal to David, and I mean that in the best way possible. On one occasion in 2 Samuel chapter 23, David just kind of casually mentions, oh man, we're not far from Bethlehem. More than anything, I wish someone would bring me a drink of Bethlehem water. Must have been good stuff, like better even than Walmart Primo water. Good stuff. And he had 3 guys that were so loyal to him. And just to satiate, not even a need that David had, just a want, they crossed enemy lines. They put their lives in danger. That's David's words, not my assumption. Those are David's words. They put their lives in danger, fighting off the enemy, breaking through to find Bethlehem water, to bring it back to David so that David could have a drink of Bethlehem water. That is crazy loyalty. That's awesome loyalty. And he just builds this tight-knit community among these misfits. The same thing that Christ has done right here at Anchored Fellowship and every other church that's ever existed throughout history since the foundation of the church by Christ himself. And we'll be going through all of the other passages that show us the just incredible fighting force, the wonderful unity that this group had. We're going to go through all of those chapters together as we continue to study through 1st and 2nd Samuel on Wednesday nights. It is quite a thing to see, or I guess quite a thing to read about in the Scriptures. It's a great type for Christ building his church so well that the gates of hell cannot prevail against it, and doing it with the least expected people to succeed in a situation like that. If you sit in the valley of decision tonight, learn from this typology. If you're distressed, if you're indebted, if you're embittered, if you're feeling foolish, if you're feeling weak, if you're feeling low, if you're feeling despised, run to Jesus, willingly submit yourself to his kingship, and then do what this group did with David. Just stick with him. Just stay by his side. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They come to Christ for a quick fix, and they don't get it. They're not willing to stick by his side. You do that. Stick by his side. Give him time to train you to become a good soldier of Christ. Give him time to change things for you. He will. I guarantee you that if you hang in there with him and be loyal to him. Now, that's all the good news. But here's the bad news. The bad news is that David himself is stressed and depressed, and now he's got at least conservatively 1,500 other stressed and depressed people to take care of. That's exactly what the Lord did here. Now, I know it says 400 men here, but do understand that is the way that the Jews counted large groups of people. They counted by heads of the home. Most of you Anchored folks know this. They counted by heads of the home, so they would give you a list and they would say, This is how many men are here. They would only count the men. So if you take the number of count for men and then you factor in women and children, it's usually a ratio of about 3, just as a conservative number. Because not every man would be married with kids, but some men would be married and have, 3 or 4 kids. So it kind of equals out to approximately, conservatively, 1,500 people. You imagine that. You're praying, Lord, things are so bad. The next thing, I just know it, I can feel it. The next thing is going to be the straw that breaks this camel's back. And then what does the Lord do? He just dumps on you about 1,500 times more burden than you already had. I'm stressed and depressed myself, Lord. This was your solution? Bring me 1,500 other stressed and depressed people to rule over, to take care of? That's a problem. David has 12 loaves of holy bread that we know of. That's all that he would have by way of food. Yes, he would have shared that with those arriving first at the cave of Adullam as they were streaming in. How long would 12 loaves of holy bread last? Probably about 12 people that didn't get seconds. It would not last long, so they have no food. David has one giant weapon that's too unwieldy, is that a word? Let me try to rephrase the whole sentence, make this more like suitable for English. One giant weapon that's too big for anyone to really actually use in battle. It's not like he has suitcases packed with clothes. David has next to nothing, and now approximately 1,500 more people with next to nothing show up and basically say to David, we're here, help. We're here, we need you. Be our king, take care of us. So, going to be fun, right? As David tries to figure this all out. Verse 3. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me. Verse 4. And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. That would be in the cave of Adullam. So upon the arrival of all of these misfits, the first thing David wants to do is, I'll put it like this, obey the 5th commandment and honor his father and mother. He wants to get his parents somewhere safe. If hundreds, perhaps thousands of people have been able to figure out where David's located, then you got to figure it's only a matter of time before Saul figures it out too and shows up. And he does not want his aging parents to be in Saul's target range. Saul doesn't need any more target range with his spear. He's been target practicing a lot. You figure he's probably getting good enough to hit someone soon. And David does not want that to be his parents. So David says, Dad, Mom, great to see you. Love you guys. Thanks for coming to check out my new flat. But I can't let you stay. You're in danger here. Anyone teamed up with me right now, your life is on the line. And these other folks, Joe Schmo, Joe Stranger, if he wants to put his life on the line and join up with me, that's one thing, but not you guys, not family, not my parents. I've got to get you to a safe space. And Moab was a good choice. It would be around 20 miles southwest of the cave of Adullam where David and his Gloomy band were located. It's on the east side of the Dead Sea. It's modern-day Turkey. And the Moabites were enemies of Israel. So there's just no chance that Saul's going to be meandering about through the streets of Moab, knocking on doors to try to find David or his family members. That's not going to happen. If Saul comes into Moab to look for David, he's going to have to go through the entire army of the Moabites first. And as we just read in the text, it sure does appear that David's mom and dad are actually staying in the palace or the house, whatever, of the king of Moab. So they would not only have to overcome the entire army, but they would have to get to the king himself, and he would be the most protected man in all of Moab. So this is really, at least from human perspective, a very good place for his parents to be safe and secure. Anything, harmful would be very unlikely to happen to them. And I don't know if David brought this up in the conversation. I'm pretty sure I would, but do you remember David actually has some Moabite blood in him? Did you forget that? Yes, David's a Jew, but David has some Moabite blood in him because his great-great-grandmother, Ruth, was a Moabitess. So he could show up and say, whoa, hold everything, please don't shoot. Put your arrows back in your quivers. Listen, yes, I'm a Jew. I know you hate us, but I've also got some Moabite in my blood. Truth is, David actually probably had family there still in Moab. Who knows how much communication he would have with them. But yeah, there's a blood relation here, and this is a really good move for David to make. I don't know that anyone else would have had this connection with Moab, to be able to walk into Moab and say, hey, favor, please. But David can. David has some Moabite in his blood. Verse 5, then the prophet Gad said to David, do not remain in the stronghold, the cave of Adullam. Depart and go into the land of Judah, southern Israel. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. All right, first of all, this prophet Gad, this is the first time we've read about him. He sort of comes out of nowhere without any introduction. But you are going to get to know this guy very well as we study along in the life of David, because this guy Gad, this prophet, he becomes the spiritual advisor to David. He becomes the voice of God in David's ear, and not just for a couple years, but for about 40 years or so. Beginning right here, and this is, we figure, circa 1010 BC, something like that, all the way to about 970, circa 970, circa 960 BC, when Solomon's temple is built. This guy Gad, he's going to be right there side by side with David as David's praying, responding and saying, okay, David, here's what the Lord said. So that is a significant piece to have in place if you're David, a king who's just suddenly come to have many subjects, and you don't know how to lead these people. You don't even know where to start. You don't even know where to go at this point. What's the first thing you need? Or I guess I should say, what's the next thing you need if you're David? You need a prophet. You need someone that can respond back to you with what the Lord says when you pray. David has been praying this whole time. We know that. I've been sharing with you as we go through these stories. Here's a psalm that David wrote when this event took place. Here's another psalm that David wrote when this event took place. Those are called miktoms, and I've been sharing those with you. There's two more that David wrote about his time spent in the cave of Adullam. That would be Psalm 57 and Psalm 142. I'll let you read those later on your own time, but you read all of those psalms as David's going through these early events, and as I've been sharing with you, it's very clear to see that all along, even in David's panic, even in his fear, even in his doubt, even in his confusion about what to do next, he is always, the whole time, still praying, still crying out to God, and to some degree, still trusting God. Because say what you will, if you're still calling out on the Lord, that's a measure of faith. It takes a measure of faith to do that. You wouldn't waste your time if you didn't have some measure of faith that would actually matter if you called out to the Lord. I think we sometimes get all bent out of shape about our level of faith when we should be able to relax because of what Jesus told us about mustard seed size faith. It doesn't take much, does it? Just a little bit of faith. Really all it takes is the kind of faith it took Peter to cry out and say, "Save me, Lord," as he was sinking after about walking on the water for 30 seconds or so, right? So that's the kind of faith that David had as he was going through this. But in those events, David had no way to hear back from the Lord. He could only talk to the Lord. It didn't work in the Old Testament the way that it works for us. We can talk to the Lord and we can receive, if nothing else, impressions and promptings, persuasions of the Holy Spirit to tip us to the right or to tip us to the left, to help us with our decisions, to give us encouragement, to point us and push us in the general direction. David didn't have that. These are Old Testament days, and now he's got that. He's got a very important piece in place. He has reinforcements that have arrived, and now he has a prophetic voice in his life, and this is a good starting point to move forward as David begins to build his kingdom, or should I say, as the Lord begins to build David's kingdom for him. The word Hereth means thicket, and you will not find Hereth mentioned in any other location in the Scriptures or in any other extra-biblical historical source, which leads me to believe that maybe that word Hereth should not have been transliterated, but maybe it should have just been translated to say thicket. I think that's what the text was telling us. Not that Hereth is a location, but that what David did was he went into the forest of thickets. At least that seems to make sense to me. Verse 6. Don't worry, I think we are going to actually get through this. And then the story picks up a little bit. Verse 6, especially if I skip some verses. No, but I won't do that. Verse 6, now Saul heard that David was discovered. It makes it sound like he got a record deal, but it's not what it's talking about. David didn't get a record deal. He was discovered. That means that one of Saul's people has found out where David was hiding out. We knew that was short-lived. We knew that Saul was going to find out very soon, and now he has. Reading on, and the men who were with him, they now know about David's gloomy band of misfits as well. So David and the men who were with him, I read the wrong emphasis, but I did read the correct words. A for effort. Reading on, Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. Saul really liked that spear, didn't he? I think I said last week, will someone please, for crying out loud, get that spear away from Saul? He really loves that spear. Most kings would carry around a scepter or something. Saul's going to have his spear everywhere he goes. Because, if you're Saul, you never know when the mood is going to hit, and you might need to spear some fool to death. That's the way he looks at it. I bet he even probably slept with his spear, probably put it right between him and his wife in the bed there at night, just in case she acted out. Kind of guy that Saul was. Verse 7, and Saul said to his servants who stood about him, hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse, and real quick, just stop there for a second. Have you noticed that Saul will not use the name David? He just will not use it. He will only refer to David as the son of Jesse. He's like a overly jealous boyfriend who won't say the name of his girlfriend's ex. He'll be like, that other guy. Did he ever bring you flowers like this? That's like really striking at the heart of what Saul's doing here. Listen, he says, that other guy, who we know to be David, will he give every one of you fields and vineyards? Ever bring you flowers like this? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is he going to give you good positions? Is he going to give you land and houses, vineyards, farms? Is he going to give you good positions within the military? Now, I know we're stopping mid-sentence here for Saul, but I do just want to quickly point out that what Saul has done is he has indirectly just revealed to us that he has been employing dirty politics. You're wondering how things got so bad in Israel that even just, not only David, but the rest of the Israelites were feeling the poor decisions of Saul. Well, this is part of it, dirty politics. He's favoring his own tribe. His own tribe was getting rich, fat, and sassy because of pork spending. Saul was giving them additional, and that's got to come from somewhere, doesn't it? It would come from the other 11 tribes. So he's just pouring it on this one tribe, the tribe of Benjamin, his tribe, and it's pretty obvious what he's doing. He's telling us, he's indirectly telling us, look, I've been giving you all of these government handouts because obviously I want your devotion. I want your support. I need you on my side. He's just confessed that. He's just confessed to dirty politics. Dirty politics never change, do they? Dirty politics looked the same in circa 1000 BC as it does in 2025 AD. Not that the current administration would ever do anything like that. Of course not. But it's always been the same. You bribe people. It drives me crazy what they do with the bills that they pass. They want to pass one little thing. They could probably say it on a page. So what do? They make a 4,000-page book, and they stuff all kinds of other stuff in there. Pork spending, garbage stuff no one would in their right mind agree to. But if you want to pass the one thing that's on the one page in the middle of the bill, you get past it all. I hate that stuff. That's unjust. That's dirty politics, and that's the kind of guy Saul is. That's exactly what he's doing here. He says, would that guy do everything for you that I'm doing for you? Verse 8, that all of you have conspired against me. So he's a little paranoid here, a bit of a conspiracy theorist. If he were alive today, I'm pretty sure he'd be a flat earther and wouldn't believe that the moon landing actually happened, which I also happen to believe. Reading on. No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. So, to be fair, they probably didn't tell Saul that Jonathan was in league with David because they themselves didn't know. All of this is happening really fast. Saul has somehow found out. So obviously the cat's out of the bag, but I doubt any of these guys knew. And if they knew, yes, they probably would have told Saul, your son, he's just way too close to David. They've made a covenant. There's a peace pact there, so that's bad for you, Saul. Reading on. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. Now that's my favorite part in all of this. None of you are sorry for me. None of you feel bad for me. I want your sympathy. I want your pity. I want all of your attention. I've got to have that. So he's playing the victim. And I would not pity Saul, but I will admit that Saul is very pitiful here. This is absolutely pitiful for the man, supposedly the king of Israel. Quite a way to act. Verse 9, then answered Doeg the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub. Verse 10, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. Okay, this is bad. It's not just bad that Doeg has identified the high priest Ahimelech, but what's even worse is that Doeg does not give Saul the entire story. Saul was already mad enough to probably do what's going to follow in this chapter, but Doeg has just made things so much worse because he didn't tell the full story. If you listen to Doeg tell it, it would sound like Ahimelech, the high priest, was in league with David, that he was intentionally conspiring with David to support David in the face of Saul. But that's not at all what happened, is it? Ahimelech, we know, is completely innocent in all of this. In chapter 21, David was lying through his teeth to the high priest. So David made Ahimelech believe that he was on mission from Saul. And what does that say? That says, hey, I'm still in Saul's good graces. Everything's normal. I'm still the guy. He completely lied. He completely deceived Ahimelech. And Doeg doesn't tell Saul any of that. So it makes Ahimelech look really bad. It paints him in a very unfavorable light. Now, it is true, Doeg may not have known the details there. He may not have actually heard the conversation. We know he was eavesdropping to some extent because David acknowledged him there in chapter 21, and we knew that was going to be a problem. Maybe he was outside the gate, the fence, I should say, of the tabernacle looking in. Maybe he sees David go in empty, and he sees David come out with 12 pieces of holy bread, 12 loaves of holy bread, and the sword of Goliath. Maybe that's what happened, but him not telling the whole story, that's a really bad thing for Ahimelech. Verse 11, then the king sent to summon Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub. Keep wanting to get a hot tub joke in there, but I can't ever figure out how to do it. I guess I'll just leave it alone. I'm sorry, was I thinking out loud again? All right. The king sent to summon Ahimelech and all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob, and all of them, you could underline that, it's important, all of them, every one of the priests, came to the king, verse 12. And Saul said, "Hear now, son of Ahitub." And he answered, "Here I am, my lord." Verse 13. And Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait as at this day?" Verse 14. Then Ahimelech answered the king, "And who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, and captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house?" Verse 15. "Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little." So I have no idea what you're talking about. Ahimelech did not know that Saul and David ever had this falling out. He had no clue about that. When David showed up at the tabernacle, he had no reason to believe that David was no longer Saul's right-hand man, his greatest warrior, in perfect standing with Saul, family member, in-law in good standing. Ahimelech did what any person in his position would do. You would feel like you had to give Saul's number one guy whatever he requested, because you never know if that's coming from the king or not. If it is, you can't stand in the way of that. Even if not, if he goes and complains to the king, you're in trouble. So you pretty much do whatever the guy would want you to do. Ahimelech did nothing intentionally wrong. His only wrong was actually incidental to being deceived. And he has told that perfectly to Saul here. If Saul were a rational man, might still be a little bit angry, but he would understand and he would say, "Okay, I can't fault you for a mistake. You didn't know any better." But Saul is not a rational man. He is not a stable man. So verse 16, "And the king said, 'You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house,'" your entire line. We're cutting your entire family tree down here, Ahimelech. Verse 17. "And the king said to the guard who stood about him, 'Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David.' And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But," momentary bright spot, "the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord." And to that I say, good for them. There comes a time where civil disobedience is the best course of action. There are times where that is called for. We know as Christians we are even to obey government, whatever they tell us, all the dumb rules they put on us. Okay, sure. But if they ever put a rule on us or demand something of us that would cause us to violate God's word, his law, the commandments of Christ, then that is where we dig our heels in. We draw our lines in the sand. And we civilly disobey. This is the time to do that, and these men are correct for doing that. Verse 18, "Then the king said to Doeg, 'You turn and strike the priests.' And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priest and killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod." That would be one by one priest after another, slaughtering them before the Lord. Verse 19, "And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword, both man and woman, child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep he put to the sword." Now, put to the sword does not mean like held them at sword point and convinced them to comply. It just cannot mean that. It is a Hebrew expression. It's an idiom. And it does mean to kill with the sword. It means to slaughter. So put to the sword means killed with the sword. Now, I don't know if I said last week, that Doeg killed 85 people total. Did I make that statement? If I made that statement, I certainly didn't mean to. It was not 85 people total, folks. It was 85 priests. And then their entire families and this entire city of priests and family members to priests. So this was a horrific massacre. And it was by far the single worst thing ever affected by King Saul. The worst thing he ever did by far. You're not going to find something worse than this. This is a lot of life that Saul has caused to be lost. It is poetic in the worst kind of way that it comes at the hand of an Edomite. Because, yes, Doeg was an Edomite. Herod the Great was an Edomite. Idumean, New Testament twist, same thing. Idumean is Edomite. Herod the Great was an Edomite. And what did Herod the Great do? Something pretty similar to this. He had all of the children 2 years and younger in the city of Bethlehem slaughtered for a similar reason that all of this is happening. Jealousy to keep his crown. He wanted to stay king, and he had heard word that the king of the Jews was born in the city of Bethlehem. You know the story, right? I think you know the story. You should know the story. If so, we failed you as a church. Should have taught you that like day one of salvation. So I guess what I'm saying here is if you ever run into an Edomite, you might want to just be a little cautious. Watch your back a little bit. They're supposed to be extinct. Is that the right word for a race? When they disappear from the earth, we'll use it. They're supposed to be extinct, but if you ever do stumble across an Edomite in your life, just be careful. Watch your back, just in case. Verse 20. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, which we'll call him Abiathar, that seems to be the common English pronunciation. Abiathar escaped and fled after David. Verse 21. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. So there were 86 priests total. 86 priests were there. One of them has escaped. Verse 22. And David said to Abiathar, I knew it. I just knew it. I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul. And yeah, we read that in chapter 21, verse 7. Just like you're reading the story. And then it stops at verse 7 and tells you that Doeg was there eavesdropping to some extent on the conversation. And you just knew that felt out of place. That felt like that was going to be important later. And it's definitely important later. That's verse 7 is telling you David noticed that. David saw Doeg. He recognized the guy. He knew he was a loyal soldier to Saul, and he knew that was going to be trouble. Reading on, he says, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. So he says, it was all my fault. I caused this. I didn't do it, but I caused all of this. And David knew that in chapter 21, verse 7. Well, I shouldn't say he knew that. He recognized Doeg. He knew it was going to be a problem for Ahimelech, but I don't think even David would expect that Saul would be this dark, this demonic, this so far gone that right there in their, present day holy city, right at the tabernacle, maybe in the tabernacle, slaughtering 85 priests and not stopping there, but then killing every one of their family members, their little kids, their wives. I don't think David even dreamed that Saul was capable of that. So he's feeling the weight of that. In verse 23, we read David says this to Abiathar, stay with me. Do not be afraid. For he who seeks my life seeks your life. With me you shall be in safekeeping. So in other words, we may not like this, but Abiathar, we're in this together now. You're just as wanted as I am. You can't go back. You can't show your face around Saul. If he figures out that he missed one of the priests of Nob, then you're a goner. So stick with me. Be a good place for a line, come with me if you want to live. That's what he says. I got them killed, but I can keep you alive. I'll fight for you. And we stand and we close in a word of prayer.